Welcome to Sensitive Matters. Today, I'm honored to be joining with one of my dearest beings, Fio Gede Parma, a deeply passionate and committed witch, spirit worker, diviner, and author of 8 books. Fio's practice is rooted in the wisdom that comes from the night, the underworld, the inner world, and the wildwood. With all they do, Fio deeply honors the voices of the marginalized and those often considered uncanny, people and spirits who don't fit into conventional norms. Their work centers on honoring the sacred in all its forms. Fio is an initiated witch, hereditary spirit worker, tarot reader, teacher, and writer. Today, we'll explore their connection with witchcraft and inquire into some tarot wisdom to reflect back on this year and get a sense of the year to come. Welcome, Fio. What an honor to be with you.
What an honor to be with you as the moon freshly waxes.
I know. Aw, yay, we get to be together. Before we dive in, I would love it if you could guide us through acknowledging country, which I know is something you always do, and maybe before or after, for anybody who is unfamiliar with this practice, just speaking to it for a moment.
Okay, so remembering that you are a living, breathing being in this holy planet, in this holy star system, in this holy cosmos, but bringing your attention right now to exactly where you are. And where you are is sacred and holy, and where you are has immense story, myth, history, truth, power. Where I am and where many of you are right now will be unceded, stolen, sovereign lands that are a part of primordial ancient stewardship systems of First Nations communities that have been violently interrupted and continue to be violently interrupted, overtly, insidiously, all the time, systematically, systemically. I acknowledge that I am in the sacred, stolen, sovereign lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples, the exact place where the British invaded in 1788 and where colonization really began here in so-called Australia. I acknowledge the elders of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples, past, present, and those elders who are beginning to emerge. I acknowledge the old people, the dreaming creators, the songlines, the sciences, the kinship systems, the communities and law systems, the friendship, the sorrow, the heartbreak, the joy, the power, the triumph, the resistance in the face of continued colonization. And this will ring true in so many places in this ravaged, beautiful earth. I acknowledge that I am a settler here, that I descend from colonizer settlers. And I acknowledge the power and providence and sovereignty of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, indigenous First Nations peoples everywhere. And if this is not part of the place where you are in some strange way, then there you are in the place that perhaps you are indigenous to. And perhaps you are indigenous in a different place listening to this, and I acknowledge you. I acknowledge all indigenous forms of knowing and life on this planet. An acknowledgement of country is something, it's a phrase common to the cultures in so-called Australia, the oldest living continuing cultures on planet Earth. And we call it that, they call it that, and we call it that because we're acknowledging the sovereignty of country. Country is an borrowed English word, but it refers not just to land as Western minds might see it, but the sky, the stars, the rivers, the sea, the dreaming, which is the deep truth of all things here, and the deep ancestral belonging and the deep unfolding. And when we acknowledge country, we're acknowledging that we are a guest, maybe an invited guest, possibly an uninvited guest. And we are doing our best to be humble and listen and acknowledge the truth of the reality of things, which is first that it's sovereign. This place is sovereign, not just the humans, but everything, and the humans as a part of the everything. And then, of course, we have to acknowledge the colonial realities that have completely changed everything, including their deep, devastating impact on indigenous peoples, and the rivers and the seas, which are their cousins, their brothers, their aunties, their uncles, their grandparents, their elders. And this kind of act is not just a box to tick. It is a magical, spiritual, political act of great power.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel called to acknowledge the place where I am, the island of the Balinese people. Yeah, and the honor that I get to be a guest here, and acknowledging the dynamics that exist on this island, right? The current energy of colonization, and really seeing that and speaking to that. And just deep gratitude for all that is here, the spirits, the land, the people, which we'll speak to a little bit in our conversation, because it is part of who you are and where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
And before we do that, I'd love to jump right in into, I know you get asked quite a bit, especially for people who are not that familiar, but to speak to the term witch and witchcraft, because I know you have a certain understanding and practice and life in that, and then there is pop culture and history of what a lot of people have as a first response when they hear these terms. So I'd love it if you could speak to that.
Yeah. First, I want everyone to imagine into words that they know in their languages for deeply marginalized, persecuted groups of people. So I'm sure you can think of many slurs, many words that have been reclaimed, like the word queer, which is still a slur that some people sling, but is a term of great pride for many of us. So thinking of those words, even the word woman at certain points in history, thinking of words like that, thinking of how many words you know like that are words of great power, words of shadow, words wrapped up in histories we know about and we don't know about, histories taught by colonizing, conquering forces, and histories taught by maybe the people who are oppressed or marginalized or persecuted. So which belongs to that reality. And the oldest understanding, like linguistically, we have of that word is that it means something like, from a long time ago, from thousands of years ago, linguistically, it means something like religion, magic, acts of devotion, acts of connection. So that's what people think it means. Sometimes people, and these, by people I mean scholars, and some scholars, word scholars, etymologists also believe it comes from an old Proto-Indo-European or Proto-Germanic term that means someone who can wake the dead, or someone who pours offerings on the ground. So that's very interesting, right? Like, that's probably not what you're thinking, a lot of people. And maybe some of you are completely thinking that because maybe you're a witch or you know things about language and history. But to me, the word witch is part of it's a word that belongs to the world. It's part of everything. It's one of those, I think it's one of those powerful words that touches everyone's life, even if people are not tracking that. It's a word that largely over hundreds of years, and still to this day in African nations and parts of India, Papua New Guinea, is a word that is used by patriarchal societies to defame and denigrate women, and also to persecute their intuition and magic. So it still has that, right? It still has that, like a dangerous, powerful woman. And that is a big part of witch. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there who think it means evildoer. which again, if we're looking at culture, history, context, it just, like, who is saying that? What systems of power are creating that context, right? It's often very dominating, patriarchal, coercive systems of power that are saying that. The same ones that denigrate queer people and women and the earth. So all of this is connected. A witch is someone who is intimate with the spirits and can, through that intimacy and relationship, discover things about the universe, the multiverse, can ride on the wind, can travel in other dimensions of our body mystery, can make magic. Witches, we do cast spells, we make magic, we change things because we understand that all of existence is in an unfolding, creative, destructive, transformative cauldron at all times, and that we too are part of God herself. Generally speaking, contemporary witches the world over have a deep, deep centering and place for the divine feminine. We adore, worship, exalt, and deeply respect the goddesses, the divine female spirits. We also adore and respect and worship the masculine, the male spirits, or the spirits that seem male. But then we also have all this other space for those that are not female and male and are something completely different. But essentially, what do? We change consciousness at will. We shift our consciousness, which is a description of magic from the Victorian era in England. Dion Fortune talked about it like that. And we form these relationships with ancient powers, with ever-renewing powers, as part of our sensuous, deeply visceral experience of life. Witches were often very sensuous and deeply visceral people. It's not a heady thing at all. Like, a lot of us can talk about scholarship and history because we're just like love it. But and a lot of witches are very smart. But at the end of the day and at the beginning of the night, we belong to the world, and we're a part of the secret histories of the world. We've always been there, and we're as much loved by the people as we are feared by the people, and that is a very powerful place to exist. It's also a very precarious place to exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is just lightning that went off, and as you said that, we're as much loved as we're feared, and there's thunder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is so woven in and through the speaking to the marginalized and oppressed groups. So I feel, as you were just saying, even like bringing those terms to life, you started with that, and I was wondering if there's anything else that you'd like to speak to in that direction, where it intersects, where the wisdom intersects, where marginalized groups meet in witchcraft.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is when different European colonial imperialist forces went out into the rest of the world, they would always call what Native, Indigenous, First Nations people were doing, they would call it devil worship and witchcraft. This is an indication. Obviously, that's horrible to enforce your own paradigms and conceptions, but that's what colonization is, onto people who are doing completely different things. And yet it does seem to be true that across the world, in every culture, there is a place in every culture, there are spirit workers. And again, this is a term, and not all spirit workers are witches. Witches are a very specific kind of spirit worker. But sometimes, the community priests, the druids, the shamans, the medicine people, these are spirit workers. The hedge riders, the healers, the midwives can also be spirit workers. And sometimes all of those people are also witches. So it depends. Like, witch is sometimes a little bit of a serpentine category, but often when England went out, or the Dutch forces went out, or the French, the Spanish imperialist forces, Portuguese forces went out, they would see these polytheistic, many gods, many goddesses, many spirits. They would see these medium, these practices where people would call down the spirits to fill their bodies, and they would dance, drumming, beautifully singing ancient songs to their ancestors. They would see people heal people with ceremony and song and drumming. They would smell strange smoke. They would watch people dress in animal skins and become those animals in trance. And they were so, obviously, they were Christian, they were Catholic, they were Protestant, whatever they were. And in that mind, to that mind, that is just an abomination. But the reality is, it's sacred, it's beautiful, it's a part of the cultures of the earth. And and in the history of all of those European cultures I just named, it was all there too. And in some parts of those places, it still is. There are still folk rituals, folk dances, folk customs in all of those places where people dress up in fur, where people meet at the solstices and equinoxes and dance around trees, where people pour things on the ground. Maybe they don't know exactly what they're doing anymore, but it still exists throughout Europe. And so these are obviously really ancient things. And witchcraft, in a way, is a living remembrance of that. And certainly, it's very much, witch is an English word, so it's often commenting on the histories of what we call Europe. And so coming up out of that, the magic, the shamanistic, ecstatic based trance magic of those European cultures. But of course, all of those European cultures also have their own names for that too, which is a very English Germanic word, So it comes from that stream. But now we use it for lots of things. Now lots of different Mexican people use that word. They'll use like the Spanish word, like brujo, bruja, but some of them proudly use that word. Some people of African descent proudly claim the word witch because it was used against them. And so to claim it back, we often talk about reclaiming the word witch, reclaiming the word queer. When we reclaim that, we take back all our power, or a lot of it, and we say, okay, you've called me this thing, and I will be this thing, but I will be this thing on my own terms. And that's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can feel the power of that. I'm curious however much you feel comfortable to share about your own practice and rituals and beingness as a practicing witch.
Yeah. So I guess it's my whole life, but yeah, hard to pick it out. But yeah, that's a good question because it does make me go, yeah, some of the things that witches do, we keep very silent and private, sometimes even secret, not because we're ashamed of it, but because we want to keep the power of it. We want to respect the boundaries of certain promises we make. Maybe we're initiated into a coven or a family lineage or a tradition of witchcraft, and we have certain contained boundaries, just as you do if you're part of a women's group or you're part of a you have secret recipes in your family that you pass down that are for no one else, or you're part of a yogic or tantric lineage where you make certain vows. So it's like that. But what do I do? Well, I go and I sing to the new moon when I see her in the sky every month. A lot of witches, we do that. We bow to her. We turn silver coins in our pockets. We sing to her. We mark our months by the moon. That's very common to witches and to many cultures. As you would know, living in Bali, it's so common to the Balinese to do so. We go into trance, witchcraft is a trance-based magic. We go into deep, altered states of consciousness and we journey, some would say in the spirit. I would use different words like in the fetch, which is an old Irish term. We journey in like our animal forms, our non-human animal forms. We go out, and this is why there's legends and folklore of witches turning into animals. Like shamanistic spirit workers everywhere do. We go out and we experience the deep counterparts of what we can see in the waking world. What's actually deeply in that cave? Who lives in that hill? What's up between those stars? We can do that with our ecstatic trance magic. We do that. We drum ourselves into that. We sing ourselves into that. Some witches work very solo. Of course, they're surrounded by the spirits and the infinite. Some witches are in groups and covens. I've done both, and continue to kind of go through both. Most witches work magic for liberation. We have a strong desire to, I think the thing in common with all witchcraft is like would say all witchcraft traditions have a strong love of wisdom, have a strong love of justice, and have a strong love of liberation. And we do all kinds of rituals and magic and actions to do that work in a world that is shockingly almost against that work. So there's a lot of things you have. It's like pushing a lot of stuff uphill to do that work, but we continue to turn up to it. We also help people. Like a lot of us, when someone is in a horribly domestic violent situation, when someone needs money really quickly, when someone wants to open to love, when someone needs a curse broken, when someone needs someone brought to justice in a very real way, when someone wants a child to be healed, when someone wants something lost to be found, they come to the witches. I cannot tell you how many people who are not at all spiritual come to witches in Western countries. They come to us for us to read the tarot, to see into their palms. They come to us for all of those things I just mentioned. They still come to us. That hasn't stopped. In countries where you would think it isn't going on, like Australia and the US, it is going on. So we help the people. We always have. And we come together at the times of year, the holy great times of the year. In some traditions that's 4 times, in some traditions that's 6 times, in some traditions that's 8 times. And we come and we honor the holy days of the earth. So like the solstices and the equinoxes, or the midsummers and the midwinters, or the harvest season and the dying season. Obviously, not just witches do that. In fact, I really recommend every human do that. And I think that's a great loss to the Western capitalist world, that people do not do that. I mean, here in so-called Australia, it's about to be Christmas, and what it's about to be, though, seasonally, is midsummer. And even though I know Christmas is technically celebrating Christ's birth, and that's technically not seasonal, all of the folk customs around Christmas are Yuletide customs. They're about snow and needing to be warm and being together in the darkness, praying for the light. That is not what's happening here. So it's really strange when I watch most of Australian society celebrate Christmas or Easter in autumn and summer. So I really hope for people to consider, what are the cycles of the moon and the seasons telling me about what is going on here and now? And that is witches' wisdom, but it doesn't just belong to us. It really belongs to every culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I love that you brought that in, because one of the things I wanted to bring up is, and you've said it with most things that you've just spoken to, is the relationship of these practices with nature, right? It is nature. It cannot be separated. And how important that is for really every living being to be in deep relationship and dance and honoring of nature, which is who we are and what we breathe, really.
I think that's the great provocation of witchcraft to this modern Western world. Since the 1940s and 50s, when it was revived in this huge way, it had been remnants and secrets and whisperings for so long, because, of course, people had been persecuted for hundreds of years in Europe and in the colonies, right? So, and continued. Like the colonial impact of that is still felt in, again, as I said, some African nations and places like Papua New Guinea. And that is so much a part of colonial impact. One of the greatest provocations of witchcraft to the Western world is, you are nature. You are nature. You are not distinct from nature. Humans are animals. You're an animal. And guess what? You're also divine. And guess what? You're also, you're your ancestors, which also means you have a lot of trauma to process, which also means that you're kind of like a ghost, which also means that you're here and now, which also means you're a body. That body is very real. Don't ignore your body. Like these are the provocations of witchcraft, where witchcraft is a very here and now kind of spirituality. We're like, yes, we have all of these theologies and myths and lore about reincarnation and the Isle of Avalon and what happens to you when you die. We have all of that, but we're mostly concerned with this earth and this life. That's what we're mostly concerned with. Our rituals are so much about what's happening to you right now, that is sacred. Your emotions are real, they're sacred. I feel like so many big religions out there, and witchcraft is a religion for some people, it isn't for others. You know, like big forms of like the church and big forms of certain religious traditions that aren't so centered in mysticism anymore. They really are traditions of like shame about being in a body. They're traditions of telling certain people that they aren't as holy as other people or aren't as worthy of God's love as other people. They're traditions of regret and traditions that are so obsessed with the afterlife that they barely consider this, what's going on. So it's very, witchcraft is kind of so different to that in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I mentioned that I want to bring in Bali into your roots and how, maybe just tell us a little bit what Bali means to you. I know your father is from here, but just to anybody who doesn't know you, just met you, how Bali comes into your being, into your magic.
Yeah, Bali is so inseparable. The older I get, the more I really know how much I carry Bali through the world. And so I was born there. I lived my first 2 years there, and then I was gone, and then I was brought to this land. I obviously have some trauma about that, but these are the realities of life. And then I would go back every year. My father and my mother and I came here. My sister was born in Yagara Jagara Turrbal country, which is colonially known as Brisbane. And then we lived, our lives for a few years together in different places in so-called Queensland, which is a state of Australia. And then my father really needed to go back. My mother really saw that he needed to go back. That's probably one of the most profound loving acts I can think of, what happened there. And that makes me that loving act between my parents, where one of my parents is like, I have to go be back in my indigenous cultural place. That's very profound. I don't know anyone else who has my story other than my sister. I don't know anyone else. I know a lot of people. I don't know anyone else whose parents remain married and who do this.
Yeah.
They never separated, And so I grew up going back to Bali every year. And so Bali was a place only for a month or two, though. And then my father would come for 2 or 3 months. And so my connection to Bali was mainly through the cultural magical stream, because yes, my father is Balinese, but he's just one Balinese person. He doesn't represent the whole thing. And so he would come. But the thing that is alive in my family, like everyone in Bali, is completely fucking religious. So religious in a way that many people maybe don't understand religion. So culturally embedded, so ecologically embedded. Obviously, there's many problems also in Bali. I don't want to romanticize this, but deeply embedded in culture and tradition. But some Balinese families, like everywhere else in the world, are also deeply practicing magic and spirit work. And my father's family is one of those families. I learn more and more every year. Like recently, I was there with you, and we were at my family temple, which overlooks Gunung Batur, which is an active volcano in Bali and shapes so much of the land. And my uncle, who's a priest, turned, and I could hear him talking in Balinese, and I heard some words. I could make most of it out. And they were like, oh yeah, Fio is a Balian. Just like in every generation, we have someone like that in our family. And even though I don't say that word about myself, like the word Balian, the word witch is so sacred and important to me, I'm happy to be called that by my family. And what they mean is, this is a healer, a seer, a spirit worker who can do magic. So I know that in my heart, I know it's the same thing. And so they're recognizing me, and so I just seem normal to them in a way, because that's our context. But in my mother's white Protestant Australian family, I probably seem abnormal. For a variety of reasons, not just the witch thing. But yeah. So Bali helps me retain a complete context to animism, to the idea and reality that everything is filled with life, that everything is a spirit. including a table, including the spoon, including the computer, which Balinese people would put offerings on. Like people will go, oh my God, I went to Bali and I was so moved by the fact that there's offerings on stoves and fridges and computers. And I'm like, yeah. And people seem so touched by that. And I can see what's happening in them. They're like, oh,
Mhm.
everything's alive. I'm like, everything is alive. Yeah.
Mhm. Everything's
And keeping
alive,
that.
and also not taking it for granted. You know, that surprise of like, oh wait, I can honor something like that, right? And actually acknowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. Thank you for saying that. Correct. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for speaking to that, because I feel that in my own reality as well. Just that utter permission by living on these lands and with the people here, that is not, it's not questioned, right? And as you said,
Mhm,
there's other
mhm,
shadows, but that
mhm.
particular element, that if we are the beings on this planet that care about working with spirit, that there's that deep, yep, absolutely. It would almost be weird if we didn't, right?
Yeah.
um okay, let's pivot a little bit.
Let's
let's
pivot.
let's pivot. Or like bring in, I'd like to bring in the tarot. And
Mm,
I think it's another one of those things that some people are very familiar with, some people are not, some people have heard of it, but there might be a certain understanding, right? Like they might have been at some event and there was some person pulling cards, and they might
yeah.
have some idea around it. And I'd love to hear your understanding of the tarot, what it means to you, and also how it found you, that you have
Mm.
started using it as a tool of mediation.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, I love the tarot. It's one of the great loves of my life. The tarot is a system of mystical divination. It originates in the 14th century. People believe, scholars believe, in Italy, actually. There was a convergence of certain cultural histories and streams that arose in the 1300s, the 14th century in Italy, which include Catholic mysticism, which include Neoplatonism, which existed before Christ was born, and is kind of a mystical, almost like an ancient Greek pagan mystical understanding of the cosmos, and it's like a discipline and a practice similar to almost yoga, actually, like the traditional forms of yoga. And it's also encoded within it a lot of alchemical tradition, and a lot of understandings of how the world is and the histories of the world. And so tarot seemed to begin as this game, this triumph or tarocchi game, where people would play with this deck of sometimes 78, sometimes slightly more cards, where there's at least 21 or 22 trumps, like major arcana, we now call them, which means greater mystery or greater secret, in the occult tradition of tarot. And they're like cards, like I'm sure you're all familiar. Like I think most of us are familiar with it: death, temperance, the magician, the high priestess, the pope or the high priest, the world. I think you all probably can see them flashing up in the high priestess. And these are like the big mythic things, the great archetypes, if you will, to borrow a term from Carl Jung. And so these are the big things. And then there's the minor, or what we sometimes call the pips, or what we sometimes call the minor arcana, the lesser mysteries or lesser secrets, the everyday realities of the sacred way of life that are there in front of our eyes. And that's 56 cards that include aces, and aces to tens, the pips, and then what we call the court cards. So you probably can hear or see, the Page of Swords or the Queen of Wands or the King of Chalices or something. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And they represent personalities and aspects of our own personality, and also sometimes external people. And tarot can be a contemplative, meditative thing. It doesn't have to be divinatory, but it has been used in a divinatory way for hundreds of years. So what do I mean by that? I mean, sometimes to tell what's coming. divination, obviously the future isn't set in stone, but sometimes some things are very, 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 very probable. And so the tarot can pick up on the immense probability of what is about to happen. It can read the past. I mean, I've read tarot professionally for 20 years. I know it can read the past. I know it can see the future. I know that it can tell secrets. I know that it's at its best when we ask questions like, what is the most effective, sound way of approaching this relationship in my life? Rather than, how should I talk to this person? I always stop them and go, no should. The tarot doesn't like should. Because there's no such thing as should. Like, so there's always a wide array of options. And the tarot helps us, is such a precious, powerful, often logical. I often say humans are emotional, tarot is logical. It's just a little thing to kind of go, ooh, tarot has perspective that maybe humans don't always have. It really can help us make decisions. It really can. And I've seen it do that for 2 decades. And I very seriously take its counsel. It's not just a group of cards and ink and stock. It's a whole lineage of histories. It holds within itself a whole constellation of benevolent helping powers.
Beautiful. Thank you. Can we pull a few cards to and obviously, this is, and you can speak to that as well if you wish. Like, you work with people individually, and what we're now playing with is a more collective energy. But as we are coming to the end of this Gregorian calendar year, and there is some energy closing and another opening, I'd love it if we could ask the cards if there's anything that we can take away that we might want to be reminded of or enforced by whatever is closing right now.
Yeah, let's do that. And before I do that, I really want to bring people's attention to this book. I've read a lot of books on tarot, and this book, the Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination by Robert M. Place. This is a really sound, very thorough, very easy to read, delightful book on exactly that, the history, symbolism, and divination of tarot. So I really recommend that book to people.
Awesome. We'll put it into the show notes for anybody who's listening and didn't just see the cover that Fio held into the camera.
Okay, so I'm shuffling the tarot. Not everyone shuffles, and if you can't shuffle, that doesn't mean you can't integrate the tarot. Some people will do this thing that we call cutting the deck. So they'll like cut, and then they'll put it back together, and they'll cut it maybe 20 or 50 times until they feel good. Some people mess it all up. Some people ask the reader to shuffle. So it's all good. So I'm shuffling the tarot, and the reason we do shuffling or mixing or cutting the deck is so that we're interfacing directly with the tarot, and we intuitively or suddenly, or even without knowing, sometimes we just stop mixing, shuffling, cutting, and then we pull. And so I bring this question of what is best for the collective to know, to hear, to witness about what we need to leave behind collectively, our societies, our cultures, and what we need to bring our attention to as we come to the summer solstice, as we come to the winter solstice, as we come to Christmas, as we come to the end of the Gregorian year. Okay, I'm stopping. I pulled out 4 cards from the Smith Waite. This is probably one of the most well-known occult tarot decks. The art is by Pamela Coleman Smith. This is the first card. This is the star. The second card I pulled, 7 of Cups. The third card I pulled, 4 of Pentacles. And under that, the King of Cups. So the best way, I think, to read the tarot is not in isolation. The star means this, the 7 of Cups means this. Like, a good tarot reader already knows that and brings that. But what we do is we weave a story, yes, from our knowledge of the tarot, but also with intuition and whatever else is coming through. I always say to my clients, just so you know, I'm reading from the tradition of the tarot that I hold, but also the spirits, the ancestors, and just intuition is all going on. And that's how most of us end up reading. So the star tells me, first of all, as we go in, that we need to connect, as you said before, Christina, like I think Bali really is offers us gratitude. The star is saying, hey, the thing that will bring you all back, every single one of you, that will ground you, that will cleanse you, that will refocus you on what is most important, gratitude. What connects you? What will pull you out of this mirror maze? What will pull you out of this circus of illusion and fantasy? And oh no, what if this and what if this, and all of the anxiety and depression and doubt that happens with this card? What brings us through this will be our North Star, our South Star, our connection, our conscious connection to the divine, the mystery, the sacred, to love. Who do you love? You know, in the last few weeks, I've really had to do some of the hardest things in my life in the name of people I love. It's all been about love. I've been trying my best to act from fierce love. And so what is your connection to love? Who are you grateful for? What practices in your life are you grateful for? What do you have? What flowers do you see on the sidewalk that you're grateful for? Your cat, your dog, your baby, your grandmother, your best friend, your many friends, the ocean, this TV show that you love that is so funny and makes you crack up, the bed, all of that. Take stock of that. Write a list. Talk to your friends about that. Have gratitude dinners. Tell each other what you're grateful for. Tell each other that you love each other. You never know when you will lose each other. Tell each other how much you love each other. It is so important. It is a practice. It's not just love is not a noun, it's a verb. Did bell hooks say that? Maybe. But it's a practice. Love is actually a practice. It's a hard practice, but it's one of the best things about us. And so this card is saying, take stock, keep so close to you all that you love, not in a brittle way, not in a way that you're so hard that you'll break it, but just really hold on for dear life through these times of upheaval and distress. And the King of Cups, well, there are a lot of very charismatic male politicians and leaders out there, charismatic for sometimes the wrong reasons. They can glamour us. They still have a lot of power. We still live under patriarchy. It's breaking apart, but and patriarchy doesn't mean the rule of men. It means the rule of the fathers. So the rule of, and when we say that, the rule of these people, and sometimes they're not even men, these people in positions of power over domination and control. But also there's another part of the King of Cups, this tender, fiercely loving, profoundly sensitive part. I think the world needs everyone. I think it's important that we remember that in the Great Turning, which is a term that people use in deep ecology. Joanna Macy may have conjured that term. She's a wonderful Buddhist thinker and writer. In the Great Turning, we can't just go, all men are shit. We can't go, people who are assigned male at birth are all terrible, put them in the bin. That's just not how revolution needs to be. We need to remember that those people who are men, various forms of men, male, whatever, they are sacred and divine. And yes, feminism has been so important because it has provoked patriarchy and continues to, and I am a feminist. And one of the things that we need to do as a culture is hold people to account in a way that brings them in and names the systems, not just the people, but the systems of behavior and structures that are binding us all, imprisoning us all. And how do we, I've been reading Sophie Strand's book, oh, where is it? It's so good. I've currently just forgot the title, but it's all about rewilding the masculine. I think it's called The Flowering Wand. And basically, there are older stories about being masculine that are life affirming and loving and powerful. And I think that men need to find those stories. That's actually a big part of it. And that humans always need stories. So what stories are we telling each other? So the King of Cups is also saying, what stories are you telling? Are you telling stories of the things that we lost that we can find again? Are you telling stories of eros and desire as healthy and beautiful and healing? Are you telling stories of condemnation and sin? Are you telling stories of waking up and seeing the truth and being able to have the compass within to find your way through the forest? What stories are you telling each other? So the King of Cups is asking us all that question too. And sometimes, the kings, they have to stop being kings. and we all need to come, the circle, the spiral is one of the oldest things, one of our oldest symbols. We need to come together like that, face each other, and do that work of relating intimately, which is really scary when it's actually unsafe to do so. So how do we do that? How do we take care of each other? Well, gratitude is one of the ways, coming together and confessing the cringiest piece of gratitude you have, like confessing it, because then you'll realize it's not cringy at all.
Mm-hmm.
And really holding close to those you love. And maybe it's not like saying, don't leave me, but it's like holding that thread and pouring love down that thread. Maybe you haven't seen that person in 3 years. Maybe you can't see it. Maybe that connection is unsafe for you. But still, maybe you have in your heart the power to pour love down that thread. And remembering it's not just about humans. It's about rivers and mountains and clouds and paddy melons and possums and monkeys as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Should we have a bit of a peek into the energies to come of what?
Yeah, let's do that. I'll pull some cards.
Guidance for us to know and hold.
Okay, Christina, you tell me when to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what do we have here? We have this is hard. We have the Two of Swords. We have the Three of Cups, which is also mirroring some of what I just said, but we also have the Ten of Swords. So we know, if we're paying attention, that the coming year is actually going to be a crossroads year for humankind. There are a lot of important choices that will be made that determine the next 100 years. We're at the very precarious edge of a knife. In many ways, maybe we have run out of time to completely solve things like climate crisis in a way that actually mitigates a lot of it. Maybe we've run past that point. I think a lot of scientists believe that, but I don't know. Miracles do happen all the time. So there are big choices that everyone has to make, big society choices, big political choices, but also choices we have to make about how we're going to live our lives. Are we going to live our lives in integrity with love and desire and truth and friendship? Friendship is one of the most, I think friendship is this like really, people dismiss it a lot, but it's at the core of who we are as humans. I think in the coming year, friendship, and I mean this geopolitically, I mean this interpersonally, friendship is the most important thing. It's going to be the most important thing. It is one of the most important things. And it's going to be a hard shit year in which there will be a lot of death, a disproportionate death. It's been happening. Sorrow, sadness, treachery, betrayal. That is also true. It's going to be a year that is the bottom of the barrel. But you know what the Ten of Swords also means? Sometimes it means it can get no worse than this. And I think in the world where like, really, can it get worse than this? And then it does. So the Ten of Swords is saying, hey, look, it's pretty bad. You're right, everyone. It's pretty bad. astrology is showing us that what is about to go in, the observation of the planets from the perspective of Earth right now, it's not so great. There are some, there are some things that can remediate. That's a whole other conversation, but maybe you can get an astrologer for the new year and talk about that. But yeah, I'm just gonna see what's on the bottom of the deck. Okay, on the bottom of the deck is the Eight of Wands. So it's not all is lost, everyone. Not all is lost. Again, allyships. Who are your allies? Who are your friends? This is so important in the coming year. There is good news on its way. The Eight of Wands means good news is coming, actually. So it not all is lost. But again, this is a time of collaboration. Never before have we needed to be more collaborative. There will be collaboration. There will be creative solutions that we didn't see coming. I mean, Pluto in Aquarius, and also guess what? Uranus is going into Gemini. Neptune is going into Aries, all within 6 months. That is bizarre. That doesn't happen like that, and but that is what is happening. And that's a lot of big intergenerational planets moving into new signs of catalytic fiery beginnings, signs of diplomacy, perspective, and judgment, signs of innovation, thievery, trickery, but also solution. So, I mean, here we go. I've been saying recently that everything happening in the last 5 years has been a foreshadowing. But I think we all know our boundaries now. We all know how bottom of the barrel we can be. Everyone knows this now. So, and we all know our strengths. So so this year, it's time for collaboration. It's time for discernment. It's time for, if you've been saying yes all your life and you need to start saying no, start saying no. If you've been saying no and blocking yourself to things that are really good for you, that on some level are really nourishing, say yes. But it's about discernment. It's about friendship. It's about camaraderie. And it's about acknowledging that things can be really bad, but there are solutions. And so it's going to be a mixed year in that way. There will probably be very surprising solutions, very surprising good news. And there'll be a lot of not so good things. I mean, we can see where the world is going. But just, again, the friendship thing is highlighted.
Yeah. I can feel that. Thank you. And this is obviously just a little window into a wealth of wisdom that you carry. If people are inspired by you, want to find out more, you're the author of 8 books, which every single time we speak about it blows my mind. If there's one that people should read first, which one would it be? And then in continuation of that, what's coming down the creation for you?
Yeah. I guess I have 2 answers to that. One would be, if you're completely new to the craft or magic or earth-based spirituality, I would say read Elements of Magic, which Jane Meredith is an amazing author and priestess and tarot reader as well, and is about to have her 9th book, which we did together, come out in March. She and I compiled and edited that book, but I think it has 35 voices of the reclaiming tradition. And that's the book I would say. But if you're very interested in witchcraft and its stories and lore, and you're very interested in that, then I would say read The Witch Belongs to the World. It's kind of like my guts on the page. And in terms of what's coming, Jane Meredith and we just finished proofreading my 8th, her 9th book, Magic of the Pearl Pentacle, which is a counterpart to Magic of the Iron Pentacle. And so that book is coming out in March through Llewellyn Worldwide next year, so in a few months. And I am writing, but I'm also kind of pausing and looking at the world and being like, what do I need to do? Where best am I oriented? I mean, I continue to teach online courses and in-person classes. I continue to read. I continue to be a full-time witch. I couldn't see it any other way. But I have a strong feeling that there are all kinds of collaborations coming up that I don't fully know yet. So see this space.
Yeah. And just tell us a little bit if somebody is curious about working with you, what forms are available there and where can they find you?
Yeah, mostly I try to update my my website events. So you can go to fiogedeparma.com, which I'm sure will be in the show notes. And you can go to the events thing there. And there's also in my offerings, there's also information about mentorships. And you'll see there the prerequisites and you'll see there the information. But generally, I'm running all kinds of courses. Some are totally open to beginners. Some are need certain steps, like or you might have needed to take in elements of magic, or you might have needed to, spend a year doing your own thing, and then and then I can meet you there. So yeah, that's all on my website. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, that'll be in the show notes. Oh, thank you. We love you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah.